Do you know that being intentional about creating your environments can be the secret to tons of success in lots of areas in your life? Well, let's talk about that and a ton more all on today's show. Let's do it. Your mind is a beautiful thing, but if left unattended, it can get ugly real quick. If you're not constantly curating the content your mind consumes on a daily basis, then your surroundings will dictate your daily thoughts, habits, behaviors, and actions. This show has only one goal: to leave your mind more beautiful than it was when you arrived. Welcome to the Beautiful Mind Show. Welcome to today's Beautiful Mind Show. My name is Jason Everett, and if you're on with me live and you're hanging out, do me a favor and say live in the comments. I'd love to find out if you're out hanging out with me and kicking it with us live. We're talking about intentional environments, and I've got a friend of mine with me today, Holly Fox. What's up, Holly? Glad to have you on as well. We're talking about environments. What's up? How are you?
Yes, I'm super excited to be here, and I can't wait to talk about environments. One of my favorites.
Yeah, we were just chatting, before we went live, we were talking about the environmental impact, and I don't mean environment like, glaciers melting. That's not what I'm talking about. We're talking about your environment as in like, what's the personal space you keep? And I want to start with a story that I think is really helpful to give some framework on this. Is when I was younger, I got my first car at 15 years old. I don't know when you got your first car, Holly. I got mine at, whatever it was, 15, 14, something like that. And what happened was I got a car that was like painted 5 different colors from underneath a tree that barely ran. And like, we got the car, I fixed it up, but like I got this thing painted. I installed the interior. I put all the, the seats, the carpet and the headliner and all, like, it was like, I babied this car. Like I literally put my hands on every piece of this car to rebuild it from scratch. And I remember feeling about this car that this was the first kind of environment that was my own. Like, when you're a kid and you live in your parents' house, like you've got a room and that's kind of your environment, but it's kind of like your parents' house and it's all this stuff. But the car was the first thing that I ever had in my life that actually felt like it was really mine, right? And especially since I had like literally scrubbed rust off the floor of this car, by the way. I'd scrubbed rust off the floor and like done all these things and put down like noise deadening stuff. So I could put my big speakers in. These are the things you do when you have a car when you're 15 years old. Right? Like I had done all these things to like deck out my car. When I finally had it and like could drive around, I had a bunch of rules. Like you can't have food in my car. You can't have drinks in my car. Like people would try and like set cups with condensation on top of my car. It was fighting words, right? Because I'm like, I buffed and waxed it. This thing was immaculate all the time. And what I realized is I was like, there was something that was learned inside of me at that point about the power to be able to control your own space and your own like energy and what you bring to things because you manage your environment. And so that car in its own little microcosm of the 4 seats that it had and seatbelts that existed for me, right? 4 or 5 seatbelts that were there, is that environment was truly mine. And I became the first curator of my own little environment, my own like biodome, if you will, right? Like my own little environment. Because again, my room was in my parents' house. It was not really that same space. It was a different level. My classroom I could go to was different. And so if you think about this in your life now, you've got your own little environments that you maintain. You've got your environment at work, your office space or your station or your area that you work from. You've got your car. You've got your house, right? What are some environments that you guys have in your world that you kind of are responsible for maintaining that space? Like it's your little bunker. What are the spaces that you maintain? I want to know what some of the spaces are. I gave you a couple. Tell me some of them. But Holly, I want to know, tell me a little bit about a space that you have. Do you have any sacred space? Do you talk to me about some of your bunkers, your own environments? Talk to me about that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because we actually have a bunker in the front of our house that's like the adult one with like a gas fireplace, and it's got really cushy seats. And
do you have plastic on any of the furniture? These are important questions.
Pardon?
Do you have plastic on any of the furniture? Is this a grandma?
No. This is like cushy. This is not grandma. This is not your like,
I was totally giving you a hard time. But yeah, okay. So you've got a front of the house adult bunker area.
Yep. Yeah. Cool, and that's where like there's plants and there's things that are cool up there, and it is way more adult because we don't want to smell like a campfire. But here's the thing, in the back of my house, I have another bunker that's all for my teenage kids. where they have
Mm,
a fire pit and they've got the Adirondack chairs and they've got the
those
bistro lighting.
Adirondack
And so
chairs.
it's got a totally different, more of a party vibe than
Mm,
it does in the front. The front's like at the end of my day, I get a cup of coffee and just chill out. And yeah, it's a totally different vibe when
yeah.
you go there.
Yeah, so what I want you guys to catch out of this, and again, do me a favor, type in some spaces that you have in your environment. Type it into the chat if you're on with me, either live or if you're watching it later after the fact. It's all good. I still want you to type in. But I want to know, what are some places that you are very mindful of your space? And I think that so many people, when they have chaos in their life or when they have peace in their life, a lot of times it's reflective of their space. Like we talk about this all the time. It's like, if you were to look around me, you can't tell from where you are, but you don't know. Is my environment around me totally clean and clutter free? Or is it like Einstein's desk where crap's just plastered everywhere? Like, what does it look like? And if you're watching this or listening to this, you're probably in one of those environments right now. And I would ask you, like, what does your environment give you emotionally? What does your environment give you physically? Like, I have little elements in my environment. Like, I would say this: I try to stay relatively neat, but the reality is it probably gets messy. And I'm one of those people who like stretches out my mess and then I do like a deep clean. Like I'm talking like I polish things and then it's like perfect and then it like slowly progressively gets messy and then I polish the crap out of it. I'm a detailer. Like I used to detail cars. So I mean, as you can hear by my obsession with cars, I used to detail cars all the time. And the whole idea was that I love when spaces are detailed and they're perfect, but I know that I can't leave everything detailed all the time. So I usually like let it slowly decay and then clean it back to the cleaner than anybody's ever made it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That's like my total environment. So what are some spaces you guys have? What are some things you do? Holly, give me some hot tips. What are some things that you've used to help detail a space or create a space that feels a certain way? What are some tools that you've seen? And I'll share some of the same. But what are some things that you've used to create elements of environment in your space?
So it's what I use the space for. So for example, like when I'm at work, my space at work is all like inspirational things for work or things that will allow me to be really super creative. Like I don't have pictures of my family at work, to be honest
Wait,
with
you
you,
don't like your family?
I love my family, but they don't make me go into creative mode. They make me go into mom mode or, it's different. And like the music that I use in that space is very different than the music I use when I go to work out. So
Yeah.
like when I'm in creative mode, like I have coffee vibes on, or if I'm super high energy, then I put something that's super high energy. But things are bright, things are on my walls are very much creative for like work.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've gone through like different iterations of my space at work. Obviously, you can tell like I've got like backgrounds that we use for different things. And as
Mhm.
you've been in my office, like I've got one wall that's like this like looks outside is this greenery background. I've also got my like dark like training list, my like introspective background. I've got my like thinking background. We have all these different backgrounds that are involved in the space, and then I can see the team. So I have my like business focus, which is where I'm looking at right now, so I can see my team and be in that business owner role. But I think number one, I want to talk about, if you guys want to write this down, is number one is what are the colors that you're using? You mentioned this earlier, Holly. Is what are the colors that you evoke? I've been on this like dark kick and I like this really moody dark. I've been really enjoying that space. And so all of my offices have been in this like moody, dark, reflective, almost like thinking space. I really want
Mhm.
that like that gritty leather chair that like it's soft, but it just seems like it's 100 years old. And like the smart people sat there before me. You know what I mean? Is like, I
Mhm.
want to be in that type of environment that allows me to really like be deep and contemplative and reflective and feel like you're in a study, right? I want to be in that type of space because part of it for me is I want to get myself in that mood, right? I want to get
Yeah.
myself in that mood. And it's like, if you do something like go and create like a Pinterest board and set up a mood room or something like that, you can start to curate and be intentional about the environments that you create so that when you step into it, instead of you waiting to get creative, to your point, Holly,
Mhm.
if you want to be creative in that space, then what are the things around you that you need to have to build creativity? I remember my first office that I really built out. My favorite thing in that office, because I was working running a sales and training coaching company, and like I really wanted, I was working on a global team, and I wanted to have a global perspective with everybody that I worked with, and so I put this giant world map in there, and I was working with about 45 people all over the globe. And so I put pins of all of my partners that I was working with all around the globe. So it constantly kept me in this like larger than life perspective, right? That was in one of my global offices. Like that's how I wanted to view it. I wanted to view it like global, because if you see the map, you realize like you're in this one little city and the rest of the globe is much bigger. You're like, man, they're so far away, but we can be so intimate. When I used to run a lot of national tours all over the U.S., I just had a map of the U.S. in the city, because people were in my office, because people would say, "Oh, I'm in Kansas City." I'm like, "Where's Kansas City?" You know, us Californians, we don't know anything outside of like Nevada. So it's like, where's Kansas City, and where's Stanford, Connecticut? Like, where's Pittsburgh? Where's Philadelphia? Where's whatever? And so like, I just needed to have a map that had as many cities listed on it as possible, so I could just get acquainted with it. And I know that sounds like really some simple things, but I want you to think about it is like, if you want to have a perspective of looking at your reality and say, you know, you want to be the biggest force in your area or your region, like put an image of your region in front of you. Put an image of the country in front of you. Put an image of the globe in front of you, because your focus or your zoom in or zoom out will dictate it. I think even if you're like, hey, I want to know what are the little areas that are nearby me that I want to have an impact in. And like Holly, depending on your business, like if you have a local business and you're drawing from, 10-mile radius or 20-mile radius, what does that look like? Do you pin your clients that are up on the wall? Like what do you do to help kind of get your mind on that space and that environment you're creating? Those would be really cool. So one is colors. Another one is like, what gives you perspective, right? On something like a map. Another one you want to add, Holly, that you think is helpful for mood spaces, as well as being intentional about creating those?
I like something that grounds me inside of my space,
So
or that like,
look, some people might know what grounding means, but what does grounding mean for you?
so for me, it's something that like, if I start to get a little more scattered of something, that kind of brings me back, that centers me.
Mm.
And so like, I like to have a carpet underneath my feet, or something that kind of feels almost more like grass. Because then I'm like, oh, I can totally, gets me grounded. Another thing that I like inside of my spaces is something that allows me to think. I know it seems kind of weird, but paper clips or squeegee balls or something like that, that allows me, because I'm one of those people that I think better when I've got something in my hands.
Yeah, that's it. It's funny you mentioned you think better when you have something in your hand, because I have this on my desk at all times. It's like literally my little it's like a fidget box that I can sit and flip and mess with while I'm talking, because I'm with you. And I'm also leaning on my grounding mat that's here on my desk, that's literally plugged in the wall, that grounds me physically. There's really some interesting energy just around being connected to physical spaces rather than being detached from what those grounding things are. So it's like I don't build up any static electricity and things like that in my environment, because most people are wearing rubber shoes. We've had that chat before on Beautiful Minds, right? Of like being able to get yourself grounded in a place that gives you some sense of stability. But yeah, I think you got to decide. It might be photos of your kids that ground you. It might be having something that's like a fidgety toy type of scenario in your environment. It might be having, like I've got over here, like the books on the shelf that remind me of the things that I've studied, that help me, recall, oh yeah, I remember when I read that book, or oh, when I read that book. There's there's one book over here that I read that was really impactful for me, called Extreme Spirituality. And it really gave me some deep insights. But every time I see the cover of that book, it reminds me of the time, and I can think of like where I was listening to it, and when I read it, and what the experience I went through. Like that all is instantly available, because in my surroundings and in my environment. So when you talk about this intentional environments, I'm going out of town this weekend and going to go up to a cabin on the lake. And I bring that up because I find that being intentional with where you go and the environments that you're in can be just as powerful for your rest and relaxation. Like I could go to San Francisco for the weekend and hang out, or I go to a cabin on a lake for the weekend. And I could go to a big lake like Lake Tahoe, where there's millions of people on the lake, or I can go to this little teeny private lake that literally has, I think it has 25 cabins on it. 25 cabins on a lake. It's a pretty good sized lake. Yes, random public can go there too, but there's only 25 places to stay on this entire lake. And that's a very different level of intimacy and introspection, and like just the environment itself. Like this cabin I'm going to, they have, there's no power at this cabin. They do have running water, and they do have propane. So there's like propane lanterns that we have to turn on, but no power. There's a landline that you can get phone to, and they do have internet there, but you have to put the solar charger out for 3 hours to get an hour's worth of internet. Like that's how much internet there is there. So like that is an intentional environment. And so, if that's it, like what would you do if you spent and we're going to be there for a week. So what would you do if you spent 7 days in a cabin, effectively in the middle of nowhere? You might bump into some people, and we're going to take our boat out. We'll play. We'll do all those things. What would you think you'd want to get accomplished there? Is it rest, rejuvenation? Like, just think of that for yourself. And I want you to comment in the comment section, right? Is what would you do if you spent a week at a cabin with, only 20 neighbors on the entire cabin, 20, 25 neighbors? It was really private, really peaceful. What would you do? Is it rest? Is it relaxation? Is it rejuvenation? Is it insights? Like, what would you do that would help create that mode for you and put you in a position to be in a certain mood? What would you want?
It's interesting that you're saying that, because what comes to my mind is like my road trips with my kids. Like we do a lot of road trips with our kids. We do at least one every year. And we did one a couple years ago with our son-in-law too. And we use those trips to find out more about each other and to create connectivity within each other. And I think that too is like my mom
at $90 a gallon. That's a very expensive introspective trip. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you're spot on though. I mean, how many of you guys have built lifelong relationships on road trips? If that's you, do me a favor, say road trips in the chat. How do you see cultivating the environment of a road trip, Holly?
So
make that a better trip?
Well, we always do cards. We do these reflection cards.
Oh, cards. Okay.
Cards. Yeah. And so, for example, we went on a road trip, a 15-hour road trip with my son-in-law. And I mean, we had known him, but it was just us. Our daughter wasn't with us. So we actually bought a deck of cards and we read the cards, and it started to spark conversations with us.
Like, you bought cards that had specific questions on them. They're called reflection cards.
Yes, reflection cards. And so it really created, and you couldn't go anywhere because you're in a car. You're driving around
to answer these questions for the next. How many hours were you in this car?
15 hours.
Sweet mama.
Yeah. And so, it was things like that. And then two is it was a winging it car trip. Like we brought some snacks, but we knew we were going to eat along the way. And that was part of it, like to see, like, what are you going to do when you get to this restaurant? Like, and unfortunately we ate at Hardee's because that was all that was on the pike.
The only thing in the city was burger.
Yeah. We're driving to the middle of, cross country, but it really, that to me is like, you're setting yourself up for that connectivity. And like when I was a teenager and my mom always wanted me to have one of those conversations with me, like, I'd done something, and I couldn't get out of the way or out of her, like slam the door. And
leave the conversation. You couldn't run away. You were trapped in a car. Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. It's interesting. My wife and I did several road trips down to Los Angeles. So, I live in Sacramento, or outside of Sacramento. I drive to LA. It's 6 to 8 hours, depending on how many times you stop and what you do. But usually takes about 8 hours. And I will say that those runs, I probably built some very interesting friendships, and my wife and I got to know each other a heck of a lot better, because to your point, you're just kind of trapped in this car ride for that set amount of time. I mean, I've driven out to, like, with friends, we've driven out to Las Vegas. That's about a 12 hour drive. Like, and you really do either decide to kill each other or not in some of those environments. You know what I mean? And again, I think it's important, and like what you said, Holly, about creating the intentional environments, is that can be a mode where you either curate it well and have good conversations, or it's awkward and uncomfortable and you play random games. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I mean, that's an interesting part on there. Yeah. So I think road trips are really good. I think that's very powerful. What are some other examples, guys? I'd love to know from you guys. Type in the chat for me. What are some other environments you've curated or created space that have been very powerful in your environments? And I'm going to talk about one that we have inside our house. Is that, like, you can call it different things. I've heard people talk about this as Zen zones or private zones. Like, a lot of people don't have like a room that they can call their very own, but sometimes it's just a space inside of a room that you can call your very own. A little corner that has a couple things that make you feel a certain way, that make you act a certain way, that make you operate, that you go to as an opportunity to reflect and do it. And for me, that's part of why, I mean, most of you guys know, if you hung out with me or I talk about it all the time, so hopefully you've heard it, but I bought a property. Holly, you've been out there, right? Been out to the property. We bought 10 acres. We want about 10 acres on this property. And my favorite spot is on our deck, just looking out over the property. One of my favorite spots right outside our door. And like, it's just, there's something about that spot on our property out of all the spots. There's other great spots for views and all kinds of things, but there's something about that spot that gives me like foresight. It gives me insight. It allows me to see a bigger vision than I've seen, because you've seen how far that view is, right?
Yes.
You can see how far it is. And it's just like, I just feel like whenever I don't feel like I'm playing a big enough game for myself, or I'm stuck in some drama or some problem or some obstacle or some issue or some whatever, if I stand right there, it very quickly puts into perspective how big my problem actually is.
Yeah.
Right? And that's like, I can do that every day. That's part of why we move to that property, because the environment you create and cultivate around you will dictate how you see the rest of the world. And for some of you, you're like, great, Jason, cool. I don't have a view. Okay. Well, can that be? Just a space? Can it be an environment? This might sound crazy, and I'll bring it up right now too. But like, if you've not tried virtual reality, like this is one that I just want to throw that out there, is that for people who don't have a lot of space and they want to feel what it's like to view over an expanse or go do that. I know this sounds crazy, but like, I have had some really incredible virtual reality experiences that have been allowed me to put myself in this completely different environment and mindset shift while you're sitting on the couch or in your living room, and you can still have that reflection. So maybe you're like, I don't have money to travel, or what, I don't know. You decide. If you do have money to do those things, put yourself in those positions. I can't tell you how many times I've said, like I was just down in, last week I was in Huntington Beach, and then 2 days later I was out in Orlando, and then I was back in my property, like all those places. If you can put yourself in a position that you change your perspective or you change your environment and you put yourself in that curated reality, it will redefine how you see yourself. And I can't stress it. Getting out of your own environment, because all of your problems exist in the space that you always see. Right? That's why people, when they get divorced or get married, they move into a new house. Right? Or you buy a new place. Like, I feel like a new person in this new house, even though it could be the same size, or it could be way bigger, or like I mentioned up on the front side, buying a new car.
Yeah.
Right? Changing out your environment. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I've had my same car for like 15 years. I'm like, you might want to change it out just for the idea of what's your progress. What are the things that you value? How do you do it? And what do you need to take on? Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
It's when you're talking about that too, is like going on a trip or on like a vacation or just getting outside. Like we were on Zoom together for how many ever years, 2 years, and
forever.
You had said
It was forever,
yeah,
only Zoom only. Yeah.
Forever, yeah.
Yeah.
But it was like, get outside and put your feet in the grass, or just get up and walk around. And to your point, it's like, if you are feeling like you're stuck in one area, getting up and moving to another one was really super helpful, because it gave you a different perspective. And like, even in your office, if you're feeling like, oh, I'm just not getting where I need to be in my business or in my family life or something like that, going somewhere else for a different type of perspective, work somewhere else, go to a coffee shop and work somewhere else, and see, is that movement going to help you in your thought process of how you do things?
Yeah, I have a good friend of mine. His name's Taki. Some of you guys heard me mention Taki. Maybe he occasionally watches the show. But anyway, what I love about him is that every time I talk to him, he's in some other random environment. Like when we have quick chats, we usually do them on video. But he's always like, oh, I'm at the taco shop, or oh, I'm down by the beach, or oh, I'm here. And what I always appreciate about that within his conversations is that's an intentional reality shift that he does to just continue to mix up his space. And I think sometimes we can get hung up on like, all of our conference calls or chats or whatever we have to do are in the same seat, our butts in the same place. And it's like we have our space that we feel comfortable. And I can't challenge you enough, man, to say, step out of your environment, encourage you to do something from your car, from a restaurant, while you're like, what can you do from a different space, and just try something? What if you worked part of your day from a cabin or an Airbnb or a hotel or a coffee shop? I would just encourage you to try something from a different place, because what you might find is the energetic shift that happens from changing your environment and putting yourself somewhere else might be that extra shift that you need when you feel stuck and you feel trapped, you feel constrained. Change your environment and it will change everything. We are all energy, and the spaces that we create just as much energy for us. They either count for us or they count against us for the spaces that we're in. And so if you are not feeling great in your space, move spaces. That's the amazing things about us people, is we have legs and can walk, right? We can go different places. And even if you can't walk, you can be carried somewhere. Whatever you got to do, wheel yourself, hit your electric chair, go somewhere else. Like, get somewhere that will change up your environment, and you will change everything about how you operate. So guys, I hope this has been a good show today, talking about changing your environment. Change your environment, change everything. Be intentional with the environment that you keep, and it will absolutely change who you are and how you operate as a person. So I hope this has been a good show for you today. Thanks for hanging out on Beautiful Minds. And as always, Holly, thanks for being here today. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Bye guys.
See ya. Thanks for joining us on today's show. If you want to get access to our 7-day Beautiful Minds Challenge, you can either comment below and just say 7-day, and I'll shoot you the information so you can get immediate access to that, or find me on any social media and just send me the message 7-day, and I'll make sure I get that out to you right away. And if you really enjoyed today's show, it would do me a huge favor if you went online, whether it was Spotify, Pandora, or iTunes, or any sort of podcast platform that you can find us on, and search for The Beautiful Minds Show, subscribe to our channel, and then make sure you give us a rating. Every time you give us a rating, it helps us get more eyeballs on our show and help more people have a more beautiful mind. Thanks again for joining us.